People think power is a loaded gun, a tailored suit that costs more than a decent used car, a low voice that makes grown men sweat. They thought Dominic Costa was a god because he could end a life with a subtle nod. I just saw a grown man who didn't know how to wipe up his own spilled coffee. This is the story of the city's most ruthless crime boss and the Tuesday night shift where a worn-out waitress handed him a rag and shattered his myth. Carmichael's diner smelled of bleach-burnt filter coffee and the lingering regret of the 3 a.m. crowd. Maya stood behind the faux wood laminate counter, pressing the palm of her hand against her lower back. Her shift had ended 2 hours ago. The ache in her feet had transcended simple pain and settled into a dull, throbbing numbness. Outside, a relentless November rain lashed against the neon open sign, casting stuttering red shadows across the checkered floor. The bell above the door didn't just chime, it seemed to choke. The air in the diner instantly changed. The low murmur of the 3 cab drivers in the corner booth evaporated. The rhythmic scraping of a fork against a plate stopped dead. Maya looked up from the cash register. Dominic Costa had walked in. He didn't look like the caricatures in the papers. He wasn't a scarred, cigar-chomping brute. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal overcoat that repelled the rain with eyes the color of dirty ice. Flanking him were 2 men who looked like they were constructed out of concrete and bad intentions. Dominic didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply looked at the prime booth by the window. An elderly couple was sitting there, nursing 2 cups of tea. The moment Dominic's gaze landed on them, the old man dropped a $5 bill on the table, grabbed his wife's arm, and shuffled out into the cold rain, leaving their coats behind. Dominic slid into the booth. His men stood like statues at the end of the aisle. Maya sighed. It wasn't a sigh of fear. It was the heavy, rattling exhalation of a woman who was already working a double shift and didn't have the patience for theatrical machismo. She picked up a stained coffee pot and a green order pad. She walked over. The diner was so quiet you could hear the buzzing of the fluorescent lights. "Coffee?" Maya asked. Her voice was flat, unimpressed. One of the walking concrete slabs, a guy with a broken nose and a neck thicker than his head, stepped forward. "You address Mr. Costa with respect, sweetheart." Maya didn't even look at the guard. She kept her eyes on Dominic. "Sweetheart is off the clock in 20 minutes. Do you want the coffee or not?" Dominic raised a single dark eyebrow. He looked at Maya like she was a bug he hadn't decided whether to step on or study. He reached out his manicured fingers, tapping the laminate table. "Black. And bring me a steak. Rare. Grill's off," Maya said, shifting her weight to her less painful foot. "We have meatloaf. We have cherry pie that's been sitting there since Tuesday. We have eggs." The guard took another step, his hand moving towards the inside of his jacket. He said. Dominic held up 2 fingers. The guard froze. "Eggs." Dominic said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that usually made senators weep. "Over easy. If the yolk is broken, I break the cook's hands." Maya stared at him. The sheer, exhausting arrogance of it washed over her. She reached across the table to pour his coffee. As she did, Dominic leaned forward, intending to intimidate her, to trap her in his famous dead-eyed stare. Instead, his elbow clipped the heavy ceramic sugar dispenser. It tipped. The lid popped off. A mountain of white sugar cascaded directly into the half-filled mug of water the previous patrons had left behind, creating a thick, overflowing sludge that rapidly spread across the table. It soaked into the cuff of Dominic's $3,000 suit. He froze. The mob boss, the terror of the West Side, looked down at his sticky, ruined sleeve. His men tensed, waiting for the explosion. The cab drivers in the back literally ducked under their table. Maya didn't gasp. She didn't apologize. She didn't scramble to clean it up in a panic. She calmly set the coffee pot down, reached into her apron, and pulled out a damp grey bar towel. She tossed it onto the table. It landed with a wet smack right in front of Dominic. "Wipe that up before it drips onto the floor?" Maya said, her tone the exact one a mother uses with a toddler who just upended a juice box. I just mopped. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy enough to crush bone. Dominic stared at the damp rag. Then he stared at Maya. A muscle feathered in his jaw. The enforcer with the broken nose pulled his gun half an inch from its holster. "I'm serious," Maya added, tapping her pen against her order pad. "It dries sticky. Get the edges." For 10 excruciating seconds, nobody breathed. Dominic's cold eyes searched Maya's face for the joke, for the terror, for the desperate apology. He found nothing but the exhaustion of a woman who earned minimum wage and refused to do extra cleaning. Slowly, almost mechanically, Dominic Costa picked up the damp rag. He wiped the table. He dabbed clumsily at his sleeve. He pushed the sugary sludge into a neat pile. "Good," Maya said, turning on her heel. "Eggs are coming." She walked away, leaving the most dangerous man in the city, sitting in a puddle of sugar water, holding a dirty dish rag, looking utterly spectacularly ridiculous. The next morning, Stan, the diner's manager, was hyperventilating over the deep fryer. "He's going to burn us down," Stan wheezed, clutching a bottle of antacids. "Dominic Costa. You gave Dominic Costa a mop rag. Maya, you're a dead woman. I'm a dead man. The fry cook is a dead man." Maya ignored him, aggressively scrubbing the grease trap. "He didn't shoot me, Stan. He ate his eggs, paid his bill, and left." "He didn't leave a tip," Stan shrieked. "That's a message. It means he's coming back for our knees." Maya paused, wiping a strand of tight, dark curls from her forehead with the back of her wrist. Stan wasn't entirely wrong. Costa hadn't left a tip. Just exact change for the eggs and the coffee. It had stung purely on a financial level. Maya needed $80 to cover the late fee on her gas bill. A Mafia boss could at least throw a 20 on the table after making a mess. The fear didn't hit her. Not really. When you spent your life navigating eviction notices, broken heating systems in December, and the grinding machinery of poverty, a man in a suit with a gun was just another kind of weather. You couldn't control it, so why panic 3 days past? The diner remained unburned. Maya's knees remained intact. Then came Friday night. It was 1 a.m. The post-bar rush hadn't started yet. Maya was sitting at the end of the counter, nursing a tepid cup of tea, rubbing her aching arches. The bell chimed. Maya looked up. Dominic Costa stood in the doorway. This time there were no concrete slab guards, no entourage. He was alone. He wore a dark leather jacket over a black Henley, looking less like a boardroom executioner and more like a ghost haunting the city streets. He walked over to the counter and sat on the stool directly across from Maya. Maya didn't jump up. She took a slow sip of her tea. Grill's still off. Dominic rested his forearms on the counter. His eyes up close weren't just cold. They were exhausted. Hollow. "I don't want eggs. I want the cherry pie." Maya raised an eyebrow. "It's 5 days old now." "I like to live dangerously," he said. His voice was quieter today, stripped of the performative intimidation from Tuesday night. Maya got up, cut a slice of the sad, wilting pie, and slid it onto a plate. She set it in front of him with a fork. "Coffee?" "No." He stared at the pie. He didn't pick up the fork. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" The question was blunt, heavy. It hung in the air between the humming refrigerators. Maya leaned against the back counter, crossing her arms. "Should I be? Most people are," Dominic said softly. "I've had men soil themselves when I walk into a room. I've had politicians beg on their knees. You handed me a dirty towel and told me to clean up my own mess." "You made a mess," Maya stated matter-of-factly. "Gravity doesn't care who you are. Sugar water doesn't care who you are. It's sticky. I wasn't going to clean it. You could have died. Maya let out a short, cynical bark of a laugh. Mr. Costa, my rent is $2,000 a month. I make $12 an hour. If you shoot me, I finally get to sleep in. Do me a favor and aim for the head. I don't have health insurance for a hospital stay. Dominic flinched. It was a microscopic movement, but Maya caught it. For a man who dealt in millions in life and death, the sheer crushing reality of her statement seemed to short-circuit his brain. He finally picked up the fork and took a bite of the stale pie. He chewed slowly, swallowing with a grimace. This is terrible. I warned you. He reached into his jacket. Maya didn't flinch. He pulled out a thick leather wallet, extracted a crisp, folded $100 bill, and slid it across the laminate counter. For Tuesday, he said. I forgot to tip. Maya looked at the bill. It was a lifeline. It was her gas bill plus groceries. She looked at the money, then up at Dominic's face. He was watching her closely, expecting gratitude, expecting her to grovel for the scrap falling from his table. Maya reached into her apron pocket, pulled out 2 quarters, and placed them on top of the 100. Pie is $4.50, she said flatly. I don't have change for 100. Pay with a smaller bill or take it back. Dominic stared at the 2 quarters sitting on top of his money. The corner of his mouth twitched. It took Maya a second to realize what she was seeing. The ruthless, terrifying Dominic Costa was trying to suppress a smile. A routine established itself, creeping in like mold in the damp corners of the city. Every Tuesday and Friday around 1:30 a.m., Dominic Costa would walk into Carmichael's. He always came alone. He always sat at the far end of the counter, right by the swinging doors to the kitchen. He didn't order the pie again. Maya started keeping a fresh pot of dark roast brewing, specifically for those nights, though she'd never admit it to him. The criminal underworld of the city was bleeding. Turf wars were escalating. News reports showed burning warehouses and arrests, but inside the diner the world shrank to the span of the laminate counter. You look like hell, Maya said one rainy Friday, pouring a mug of black coffee and sliding it toward him. Dominic rubbed his temples. There was a faint bruise along his jawline, yellowing at the edges. Complications at work. Did someone drop a sugar dispenser? She asked dryly. Dominic snorted, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. Worse. Someone decided they wanted my chair. Did you let them have it? No. The temperature in his voice dropped 10 degrees. The mob boss flared back to life for a split second, a chilling reminder of the violence he carried on his shoulders. I rearranged their perspective. Maya didn't pry. She picked up a rag and started wiping down the counter. Must be exhausting. Constantly proving you're the biggest monster in the room. Dominic watched her hands move. It's survival. You show weakness, you die. Sounds like a terrible way to live, Maya said, stopping to look at him. Always looking over your shoulder. Never knowing if the guy pouring your coffee is going to poison it. Are you going to poison it? I don't get paid enough to dispose of a body, Dominic. It was the first time she had used his first name. It slipped out naturally, grounding him, stripping away the titles and the fear. Dominic looked at his coffee, his shoulders dropping a fraction of an inch. Tell me about your survival, Maya, he said softly. You work doubles. You have bags under your eyes that rival mine. What are you fighting for? Maya hesitated. She wasn't used to being seen. People saw the uniform. They saw the coffee pot. They didn't see the woman holding it. My sister Maya, said, her voice dropping a register. She's 19, got accepted into a pre-med program stateside. Smartest kid you'll ever meet. But scholarships don't cover housing textbooks or the fact that she needs a laptop that doesn't crash every 10 minutes. Dominic nodded slowly. So you pour coffee. I pour coffee. I scrub grease traps. I deal with men who think a $5 tip buys them the right to grab my waist. Maya wrung out the rag in the sink. I keep her out of this city. I keep her focused. That's my turf war. Dominic was silent for a long time. The harsh neon lights hummed above them. I could pay her tuition, Dominic said. It wasn't a boast. It was a simple statement of fact. One phone call, a check is written. She never has to worry about a laptop again. You never have to scrub this counter again. Maya stopped moving. She turned to face him, her dark eyes locking onto his pale ones. No. Dominic frowned. It's a gift, not a debt. There's no such thing as a gift from a man like you, Dominic. Maya said, her voice gentle, but forged from iron. Your money has blood on it. It has the tears of people you've squeezed, people you've ruined. I am not building my sister's future on someone else's grave. We earn our way out, clean. Dominic looked like she had slapped him. His jaw tightened. The instinct to command, to force his will upon the world, flared in his chest. He was Dominic Costa. When he offered a favor, people wept with gratitude. He stood up suddenly. The stool scraped loudly against the floor. He threw a $10 bill on the counter and walked out without another word, disappearing into the dark, rainy night. Maya watched him go, feeling a strange, hollow ache in her chest. She picked up the $10 bill, rung up the coffee, and dropped the change into the tip jar. She assumed she would never see him again. She had insulted his pride, rejected his power. But the following Tuesday at exactly 1:30 a.m. the bell chimed. Maya looked up. Dominic walked in. He looked soaked, tired, and entirely stripped of his armor. He walked to the counter, sat on his usual stool, and looked at her. He didn't pull out his wallet. He didn't offer a grand gesture. He just tapped the counter. Can I have a rag? Dominic asked quietly. I tracked mud in by the door, and I don't want you to have to mop again. Maya smiled. It was a small, real smile that reached her tired eyes. She tossed him a grey bar towel. Get the edges, Dominic. Thursday night was typically the purgatory of the diner week. Too late for the evening commuters, too early for the weekend drunks. Maya spent the hours between midnight and 3 scraping dried ketchup out of the plastic squeeze bottles. The bell above the door gave its usual choked rattle. Maya didn't look up immediately. She was elbow-deep in hot, soapy water trying to salvage a severely burned frying pan Stan had abandoned. When she finally wiped her hands on her apron and turned around, the air in the diner felt instantly, suffocatingly wrong. 3 men were sitting at the corner booth. They weren't Dominic's men. Dominic's muscle wore bespoke suits and stood with the disciplined, terrifying stillness of military statues. These men wore cheap leather jackets and moved with a restless, twitchy energy. They looked like coyotes who had just found a gap in the fence. The guy in the middle, a blond man with a jagged scar cutting through his left eyebrow, was tearing a sugar packet to shreds, letting the white crystals pile up on the laminate. Maya felt a cold prickle of adrenaline at the base of her neck. She ignored it. Rent was due in 4 days. Adrenaline didn't pay the landlord. She grabbed her green order pad and walked over. What can I get you? The blond man looked up. His eyes were a pale, watery blue. He smiled, and it looked like a tear in a piece of paper. You're the girl, huh? The one who makes the great Dominic Costa sit at the counter like a good little dog. Maya's expression didn't change. She clicked her pen. I'm the girl who's going to ask you to order or leave. The grill is off. We have meatloaf. One of the men flanking him snickered. The blond man leaned forward, his elbows resting in the spilled sugar. My name is Tommy. We work for a gentleman who thinks it's very, very funny that Costa has a soft spot for a grease trap on 4th Street. He thinks it's a liability. I don't know anything about liabilities, Maya said, her voice flat. I know about coffee. Do you want some? Tommy's hand shot out. It was faster than Maya anticipated. His fingers clamped around her wrist like a vice. The grip was agonizing, grinding her bones together. Maya gasped, trying to yank her arm back, but he held fast, his thumb pressing brutally into her pulse point. "Listen to me, sweetheart." Tommy whispered, the smell of stale beer and cheap cologne washing over her. "You tell Costa that the West Side belongs to the Rossi family now. You tell him that if he keeps coming to this dump, we aren't going to shoot him. We're going to burn this place to the foundation with you inside it." Maya's heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Fear, cold and absolute, finally broke through her exhausted, cynical shell. But alongside the fear was a surge of profound, bitter anger. She was tired. She was so damn tired of men throwing their weight around in her diner. With her free hand, Maya grabbed the heavy, thick-glassed syrup dispenser sitting on the edge of the table. She didn't swing it. She just held it aloft directly over Tommy's head. "This is grade A maple-flavored corn syrup," Maya said, her voice shaking, but her grip steady. "It takes 3 washes to get out of hair, and it attracts roaches. Let go of my wrist, or I swear to God you'll be a walking sticky trap by the time you hit the sidewalk." Tommy stared at the heavy glass jar hanging inches from his skull. He looked at Maya's eyes. He didn't see a hardened killer, but he saw a woman operating on a dangerous deficit of sleep and patience. He laughed a harsh, grating sound and let go of her wrist. "Feisty!" Tommy sneered, sliding out of the booth. "Give Costa the message." The 3 of them walked out the bell, chiming mockingly behind them. Maya stood frozen for 10 seconds. Then her knees buckled slightly. She caught herself on the table, her breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. She looked down at her wrist. A dark, ugly ring of purple was already blooming against her brown skin. She rubbed it, wincing, and looked at the pile of sugar Tommy had left on the table. She didn't clean it up. She just walked to the back room, locked the door, and sat on an overturned pickle bucket until her shift ended. Friday night, 1:30 a.m. The bell chimed. Dominic Costa walked in. He looked exactly as he always did, a dark shadow against the neon lights shaking the November rain from his umbrella. He took his usual seat at the end of the counter. Maya was wiping down the coffee machine. She kept her back to him for a long moment. She didn't want him there. For the first time, his presence didn't feel like a bizarre disruption. It felt like a target painted on her back. "Black coffee?" she asked, not turning around. "Please." She poured the mug, her right hand moving stiffly. She turned and slid the cup across the counter. As she pulled her arm back, the sleeve of her uniform rode up. Dominic's hand shot out, catching her forearm. His grip was light, careful, stopping her movement without hurting her. His eyes locked onto the dark, brutal bruises circling her wrist. The thumbprint was clearly visible. The silence in the diner shifted. It wasn't the heavy, awkward silence of their first meeting. It was the terrifying, vacuum-sealed silence that precedes a detonation. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. Dominic didn't look up at her. He kept his eyes on the bruise. "Who? It doesn't matter," Maya said, trying to pull her arm away. He let her go immediately. "Maya." His voice was barely a whisper. It was a sound devoid of humanity. "Who? 3 guys." She sighed, suddenly too exhausted to lie. "A blonde guy named Tommy. Said he works for the Rossi family. Said they'd burn the diner down if you kept coming here." Dominic stared at his coffee. The muscle in his jaw was ticking so hard, Maya thought his teeth might crack. "They touched you?" It wasn't a question. "I handled it. I threatened him with a syrup dispenser. It was very dramatic." She tried to force a dry laugh, but it died in her throat. "Look, Dominic, I can't afford to be collateral damage in a mob war. I need this job. My sister needs me." Dominic slowly raised his head. The exhaustion that usually clouded his eyes was gone. In its place was something terrifyingly sharp, a cold, predatory focus. You aren't collateral damage, Dominic said softly. He stood up. He didn't touch his coffee. He didn't put any money on the counter. Where are you going? Maya asked, a sudden knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. I have to clean up a mess, Dominic replied. He walked out into the rain. Maya watched the taillights of his black sedan fade into the mist, the dread heavy in her chest. She had thought the violence of his world was an abstract concept, a headline in a newspaper. Now she knew it was coming for her. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety. Maya jumped every time the diner bell rang. She watched the shadows in the parking lot. She burned 2 batches of hash browns because she couldn't stop staring out the rain-streaked windows. Stan noticed. You're jumpier than a cat in a room full of rocking chairs, he muttered on Sunday night, counting the register. Costa hasn't been back. Maybe he finally got the hint. Maya didn't answer. She knew Dominic hadn't just gotten the hint. On Monday morning, she saw the newspaper discarded on one of the booths. The headline read, Gang violence escalates in warehouse district. 3 found dead. Maya's stomach dropped. She didn't need to read the article to know who was involved. She threw the paper in the trash, burying it under a pile of coffee grounds. Tuesday night. 2 a.m. Maya was alone. Stan had gone home early with a migraine. The rain had turned to a bitter, biting sleet. The heavy glass door of the diner didn't chime. It smashed open, slamming against the wall with a violence that made the front windows shudder. Maya dropped a stack of ceramic plates. They shattered across the checkered floor, loud as gunshots. Dominic stood in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his tailored overcoat. He was in his shirt sleeves, and his white button-down was soaked. But it wasn't just rain. The entire left side of his torso was a dark, heavy crimson. He was leaning heavily against the doorframe, his breathing shallow and ragged. He looked at Maya, his pale eyes losing focus. Sorry about the floor, he rasped. Then his knees buckled. He didn't hit the ground. Maya was moving before she even registered the thought. She sprinted across the diner, her boots crunching over broken ceramic, and caught him under the arms just as he collapsed. The sheer dead weight of him almost took her down. He smelled intensely of copper wet wool and the bitter, sulphurous tang of gunpowder. Dominic. Maya grunted, straining as she dragged him away from the door. Stan is going to kill me. He just waxed this floor. It was a stupid thing to say, a desperate attempt to ground the horrific reality in the mundane. She dragged him behind the counter, out of sight from the street windows, and lowered him to the linoleum. He was incredibly pale. His hands were shaking. Lock the door, Dominic whispered, his eyes rolling back slightly. Flip the sign. Maya scrambled up, ran to the front, locked the deadbolt, killed the neon open sign, and yanked the blinds down. The diner plunged into shadows, lit only by the humming fluorescent tubes over the grill. She ran to the back office, grabbed the industrial first aid kit Stan kept for deep fryer accidents, and hurried back to Dominic. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling. I need to call an ambulance. Dominic grabbed her wrist. His grip was weak, nothing like the iron strength he usually possessed, but his eyes were suddenly lucid and terrifyingly intense. No hospitals. They have cops on the payroll. I go to a hospital, I don't wake up. You're bleeding out on my floor, Dominic, Maya yelled, panic finally shredding her cynical composure. I pour coffee, I don't know how to fix a bullet hole. It's a knife, he ground out, coughing. A fleck of blood hit his chin. Under the ribs. Missed the lung, I think. Just pressure. Keep the pressure. Maya swore a long, vicious string of profanities as she unbuttoned his soaked shirt. The reality of Dominic Costa was laid bare before her. His torso was a map of old violence. Scars crisscrossed his ribs and abdomen, some faded white lines, others thick, ropey burns. But the immediate problem was the 2-inch gash just below his ribcage, pumping dark blood rhythmically onto the floor. She ripped open a package of heavy gauze. "This is going to hurt." "I've had worse," he muttered. She pressed the gauze directly into the wound, leaning her body weight onto her hands. Dominic arched off the floor, a strangled, guttural sound tearing from his throat. His hands gripped the edge of the laminate counter so hard his knuckles turned white. I'm sorry, Maya chanted, entirely terrified. She wasn't a mob boss. She wasn't a hardened criminal. She was a 26-year-old woman who was drowning in debt, and now she had a dying Mafia kingpin bleeding on her shoes. For 10 agonizing minutes they stayed like that, Maya pressing down Dominic, fighting to stay conscious. The only sounds were the hum of the refrigerators and Dominic's ragged breathing. Gradually the bleeding slowed. The gauze was soaked through, but the terrifying pulsing had stopped. Maya grabbed a roll of heavy medical tape and bound the gauze tightly around his torso, wrapping it multiple times to keep the pressure secure. Her hands were covered in his blood. It was sticky, clinging to her skin. She sat back on her heels, gasping for air, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. Dominic was looking at her. His face was chalk white, his hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. "Tommy won't bother you again." Dominic whispered, his voice hoarse. Maya froze. She looked at his face, then at the blood coating her hands. "Is he dead?" she asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Dominic didn't answer immediately. He let his head fall back against the base of the counter. "I told you, I clean up my messes." A cold wave washed over Maya. She had known who he was. She had known the titles, the reputation. But there is a massive chasm between knowing a man is a killer and wiping his blood off your hands while he confesses to murdering someone for threatening you. "You killed a man because he grabbed my wrist," Maya stated, her voice hollow. "I removed a threat to my territory," Dominic corrected quietly, though the lie was obvious in his eyes. He looked at her, his expression stripping away every ounce of his formidable armor. "I couldn't let them hurt you, Maya. I couldn't." Maya looked at the bloody linoleum. She looked at the ruined, shattered plates on the floor. Her safe, mundane, exhausting world had been completely blown apart, replaced by the violent, high-stakes gravity of the man lying at her feet. She stood up slowly, grabbing a grey bar towel from the counter. She wet it under the sink and knelt back down, gently wiping the sweat and blood from Dominic's face. "You're a disaster, Mr. Costa." Maya whispered, her voice trembling with an emotion she couldn't quite name. Dominic closed his eyes, leaning into the touch of the damp rag. "I know. Getting Dominic Costa off the diner floor and into the back storage room took 20 minutes and stripped Maya of whatever adrenaline she had left. He was a deadweight of dense muscle and expensive ruined fabric. She had to wedge her shoulder under his armpit and practically dragged him his Italian leather shoes, leaving faint scuff marks on the linoleum. The back room smelled intensely of industrial bleach cardboard and the faint, sweet decay of overripe onions. There was a narrow, lumpy cot shoved between a stack of commercial tomato sauce cans and a row of empty pickle buckets, a monument to Stan's frequent marital disputes. Maya dumped Dominic onto the cot. He let out a sharp, breathless grunt, his hand flying to the blood-soaked bandages wrapping his ribs. "Don't move," Maya ordered, chest-heaving. "If you pop those stitches or whatever the hell I just did to you, I'm leaving you in the dumpster out back." Dominic's eyes fluttered open. The harsh glare of the bare bulb above cast deep, bruised shadows under his cheekbones. He looked around the cramped, dingy room. For a man who controlled half the real estate downtown, dying next to a tower of canned tomatoes was a spectacular fall from grace. "Cozy," he rasped, coughing slightly. Maya ignored him. She grabbed a mop and a bucket of bleach water. She had 45 minutes before Stan arrived to prep for the breakfast rush. If Stan saw blood on his freshly waxed floors, he wouldn't ask questions. He would just have a heart attack and die by the deep fryer. She scrubbed the floor with a manic, terrified energy. Every pass of the mop erased a piece of the horrific reality of the night, leaving only the sharp chemical burn of ammonia in the air. She threw away the broken plates, bagged up Dominic's ruined, bloody shirt, and shoved it deep into the outside trash bin under a layer of wet coffee grounds. By the time the back door rattled with Stan's keys, Maya was standing behind the counter brewing a fresh pot of decaf, her uniform slightly damp with sweat, but perfectly clean. "You look like you fought a raccoon for a bagel," Stan muttered, shuffling past her, clutching his thermos. "Floor looks good, though." "Dropped a tray of mugs?" Maya lied smoothly, her voice completely deadpan. "Had to mop the splash radius." Stan groaned, rubbing his temples. "Take it out of your tips. I'm too old for this." The morning crawled by. Maya worked in a state of hypervigilance, pouring coffee, slinging hash, and watching the door. Every time a man in a dark coat walked past the window, the hair on her arms stood up. At 10 a.m., the diner hit a lull. Maya slipped into the back room under the pretense of fetching more napkins. Dominic was awake. He was staring at the ceiling, his jaw set in a rigid line of pain. Without his jacket or shirt wrapped in stark white medical tape, he looked shockingly human. The terrifying mob boss was gone. In his place was a severely wounded man hiding in a storage closet. Maya grabbed a plastic cup, filled it with tap water, and shook 3 generic ibuprofen out of a bottle she kept in her locker. "It's not morphine," she said, setting the pills on a pickle bucket next to the cot. "But it's what I have." Dominic turned his head slowly. He looked at the pills, then at Maya. "Thank you." Before he could reach for them, Maya's cell phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She pulled it out. The screen read Chloe. Maya stepped away from the cot, pressing the phone to her ear. Her entire posture shifted. The cynical, exhausted waitressing armor melted away, replaced by an anxious, desperate softness. "Hey, Bug," Maya said softly. Dominic watched her silent and perfectly still. "No, I'm at work." "Yeah, the breakfast rush just ended." Maya pinched the bridge of her nose. "What's wrong? You sound stuffed up." A pause. Maya's shoulders slumped. "Chloe, we talked about this. The financial aid office takes weeks to process the appeal. You just have to stall the registrar. I know they're threatening to drop your bio lab. I know." Maya's voice cracked slightly, a microscopic fracture in her composure. "Look, I get paid on Friday. I have some cash saved in the tin. I'll wire you the $300 for the lab fee by tomorrow morning. Just don't cry, okay? You're going to be a doctor. Doctors don't cry over administrative holds." She forced a laugh, but it sounded like breaking glass. "I love you too. Go study. I'll handle it." Maya hung up. She stood facing the wall for a long moment, staring blankly at a health inspection certificate from 3 years ago. The weight of her life, the rent, the diner, her sister, the bleeding crime boss behind her, felt like a physical pressure crushing her lungs. $300. Dominic's voice was a low rasp, cutting through the silence of the storage room. Maya turned around. She had almost forgotten he was there. "Don't," Maya warned, pointing a finger at him. "Do not do the Mafia kingpin thing right now. Do not offer to pay it. Do not tell me it's pocket change to you." "Maya, I meant what I said last week, Dominic." She interrupted, her voice shaking with a potent mix of fear and exhaustion. "I am not taking your money. I patch you up because I'm not a monster, and I won't let a man bleed to death on my floor. But I am not your charity case. I am not one of your dependents." Dominic slowly pushed himself up on one elbow. He winced, a hiss of pain escaping his lips, but he didn't stop until he was looking her in the eye. "I wasn't going to offer you money." he said quietly. Maya blinked, caught off guard. You weren't… No, you made your boundaries clear. Dominic reached for the water cup, with a trembling hand downed the pills and leaned back against the concrete wall. I was going to say that a system that makes a woman like you work yourself to the bone just so your sister can learn how to save lives is profoundly broken. He looked at her, his pale eyes entirely stripped of deception. You are the strongest person I have ever met, Maya. I just hate watching you bleed for it. The words hit Maya harder than a physical blow. Nobody had ever said that to her. People saw her as a machine that produced coffee and paid bills. They saw the attitude. They never saw the bleeding. For the first time since he walked into Carmichael's diner, Maya didn't have a sharp comeback. She just stood there, clutching her cheap cell phone, looking at the city's most dangerous man as he saw her completely. Thursday afternoon. It had been 36 hours since Dominic Costa bled on the linoleum. He was still in the back room. He was running a low-grade fever, but the wound hadn't turned septic. Maya brought him soup from the kitchen water and updates on the street outside. Stan was oblivious, complaining about the smell of old bleach and missing a box of medical gauze. At 2:15 p.m. the diner was mostly empty. The late lunch stragglers had paid and left. Maya was wiping down the laminate counter, her mind drifting to the wire transfer she had sent Chloe that morning, leaving exactly $14 in her checking account. The bell above the door chimed. Maya looked up. 2 men walked in. They weren't Dominic's men, and they weren't the twitchy cheap leather thugs like Tommy. These men wore charcoal suits that fit a little too well, and they walked with the slow, arrogant entitlement of men who owned the concrete beneath their feet. The man in front had silver hair slicked back, and a nose that had clearly been broken and reset perfectly. He exuded a quiet, absolute authority. Maya felt the blood drain from her face, but she didn't stop wiping the counter. The survival instincts she had honed over years of poverty kicked into high gear. Panic got you evicted. Panic got you killed. Apathy was armor. The silver-haired man walked straight to the counter. He didn't sit. He stood tall, looking down at Maya. Coffee? Maya asked, throwing the dirty rag into the sink. No, the man said. His voice was smooth like expensive bourbon. My name is Carmine Rossi. The name dropped like an anvil. Rossi, the family Dominic had gone to war with. The family of the man Dominic had murdered 2 nights ago. Congratulations, Maya said flatly, picking up a plastic squeeze bottle and starting to refill the ketchup. Do you want a menu, Carmine, or are you just here to introduce yourself? The younger man beside Carmine bristled, stepping forward. Carmine held up a hand, stopping him instantly. Carmine smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm looking for a friend of yours, Carmine said, resting his manicured hands on the laminate. Dominic Costa. Maya didn't miss a beat. She unscrewed the cap of a ketchup bottle. Don't know him. That's funny, Carmine mused, glancing around the empty diner. Because my associates tell me Costa practically lives at this counter. They tell me he's very fond of the waitress with the bad attitude. Lots of guys sit at this counter. Maya replied, squeezing a massive dollop of red ketchup into the plastic bottle. Some of them leave tips, some of them leave messes. I don't ask for ID and I don't care about their names. If your guy owes you money, look somewhere else. Carmine leaned in closer. The smell of expensive cologne and peppermint mouthwash washed over her. One of my boys went missing on Tuesday night. Carmine said, his voice dropping to a whisper that commanded the room. Tommy. Blonde. A little loud. He came in here to deliver a message to Costa. Now Tommy is gone. And word on the street is Costa hasn't been seen since Tuesday either. Maya forced her heart rate to slow down. She looked Carmine dead in the eyes. A blonde guy came in here on Thursday. Maya said, her voice dripping with bored irritation. He made a mess with the sugar, grabbed my arm, and I told him I'd pour maple syrup on his head if he didn't leave. He left. That's the last I saw of him. If he's missing, maybe he annoyed someone who doesn't mind going to jail. Carmine stared at her. He was looking for the lie. He was looking for the microscopic twitch, the drop of sweat, the nervous swallow. Maya gave him nothing. She was a woman who argued with landlords and debt collectors. A mob boss was just a debt collector with a nicer suit. "You're very calm for a girl standing in the middle of a war zone," Carmine observed. "I work for $12 an hour and live in a basement apartment, Mr. Rossi." Maya said, screwing the lid back onto the ketchup bottle with a definitive snap. "My whole life is a war zone. You in a nice suit doesn't scare me. Now order some food or get out of my diner." The younger thug reached into his jacket. "You disrespectful little—" "Enough!" Carmine snapped. He looked at Maya for a long, calculating moment. Then slowly he pulled a crisp $100 bill from his pocket and laid it on the counter. "For the ketchup," Carmine said. "If you see Costa, tell him the Rossi family sends their regards, and tell him there's nowhere in this city he can bleed where we won't smell it." Carmine turned and walked out, his shadow trailing behind him. The bell chimed. The door closed shut. Maya stood perfectly still for 10 seconds. Then her knees completely gave out. She grabbed the edge of the counter, sinking down until she was sitting on the rubber anti-fatigue mat, her breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. Her hands were shaking so violently she had to press them flat against her thighs. She had just lied to the head of the Rossi crime family. She had just painted a massive target on her own back to protect a man she barely knew. A shadow fell over her. Maya looked up. Dominic was standing at the edge of the kitchen doorway. He was pale, sweating, and leaning heavily against the doorframe for support. His left hand was pressed tightly against his bandaged ribs. In his right hand, gripped with terrifying, white-knuckled intent, was a heavy black pistol. He had heard everything. He had dragged himself out of bed, ready to walk out and start a bloodbath to protect her, only to watch her handle it with a ketchup bottle and sheer unbreakable nerve. Dominic looked down at her sitting on the floor. He slowly lowered the gun. "You didn't give me up." He whispered, his voice thick with an emotion that sounded entirely foreign to him. "He would have killed you, Maya. If he pushed, if he searched the back, he would have killed you." Maya leaned her head back against the cabinets, closing her eyes. "I know." "Why?" Dominic asked. He pushed off the doorframe, taking a slow, agonizing step toward her, then sinking down onto the floor beside her. It was a clumsy, painful movement, but he didn't stop until he was sitting next to her on the rubber mat. "Why did you protect me?" Maya opened her eyes and looked at him. He was a ruthless killer. He was dangerous. He was everything she should run from. But looking at him now, pale, wounded, and staring at her with a reverence she had never experienced, she realized the terrifying truth. "Because you clean up your messes, Dominic," Maya said softly. "And I guess I clean up yours." By Friday night, the diner felt less like a workplace and more like a pressurized submarine waiting for the hull to breach. Carmine Rossi did not return, but his shadow lingered over every customer who walked through the heavy glass doors. Maya found herself cataloguing exits, memorizing faces, and keeping the heavy iron skillet within arm's reach of the register. Dominic was still in the storage room. His fever had broken Thursday evening, leaving him weak, but agonizingly restless. The cramped space, which had been a sanctuary, was rapidly becoming a cage for a man used to absolute control. At 3 a.m., the diner was entirely dead. The rain had stopped, leaving the city slick and quiet. Maya was sitting at the counter, methodically unscrewing the tops of glass salt shakers, her mind miles away. The storage room door clicked open. Maya's head snapped up. Dominic stood in the doorway. He was still wrapped in medical tape, but he had managed to pull on a pair of dark slacks. His chest was bare, showcasing a brutal canvas of bruising that had blossomed into ugly shades of yellow and purple across his ribs. He didn't lean against the doorframe this time. He walked slowly, deliberately, pulling a stool out and sitting beside her. "You shouldn't be out here," Maya said, her voice low in the empty diner. "Stan comes in at 5. If I look at that tower of canned tomatoes for one more hour, I'm going to lose my mind." Dominic muttered. He looked at the massive pile of empty shakers and the large cardboard box of iodized salt sitting between them. He reached out. Maya watched in stunned silence as the most feared man in the city picked up a salt shaker, grabbed a small plastic funnel, and began pouring salt into the glass. "What are you doing?" she asked. "You look tired." Dominic said, not looking up. He screwed the silver metal cap onto the shaker, set it aside, and picked up the next one. "I have 2 working hands, and I owe you." It was a deeply bizarre sight. Dominic Costa, a man who orchestrated hostile takeovers and dismantled criminal empires, sitting in a dimly lit diner, diligently filling salt shakers. His face was set in a mask of intense concentration, treating the mundane task with the same gravity he probably applied to multi-million-dollar negotiations. A sudden, unexpected laugh bubbled up in Maya's chest. She tried to stifle it, pressing her hand over her mouth, but a small snort escaped. Dominic paused, a shaker halfway filled. He looked at her, his dark brows drawing together. "What?" "Nothing." Maya gasped, shaking her head. "It's just, if Carmine Rossi walked in right now, I don't know who would be more embarrassed, me or you." The corner of Dominic's mouth twitched. He set the shaker down. "I've ordered men killed for less insubordination, Maya. I saved your life." She shot back a genuine smile, finally breaking across her exhausted features. "You can't kill me. It's a conflict of interest." Dominic looked at her smile. The harsh neon lights above didn't flatter anyone, but right then, looking at the tired lines around her eyes and the grease stain on her apron, Dominic felt a strange, heavy quiet settle in his chest. The relentless roaring noise of his life, the paranoia, the violence, the constant calculation just stopped. "I have to leave," he said quietly. Maya's smile faded. She picked up a napkin and wiped down a stray grain of salt. "I know. Rossi knows I'm weak. He's pushing into my territory. If I stay here, I drag this diner into the crossfire. I drag you into it." Dominic leaned forward, his forearms resting on the laminate. "I have a car coming at 4. My people are going to move me to a secure location." Maya nodded slowly. She had known this was coming. He belonged to a world of blood and tailored suits. She belonged to a world of coffee grounds and past-due bills. They had intersected only because gravity and a spilled sugar dispenser demanded it. "You need a shirt," Maya said, practically standing up. "You can't walk out to a car half-naked in November." She walked to the small locker room in the back. A minute later she returned, holding a garish neon-blue bowling shirt with the words "Stan's Strikers" embroidered on the back in bright yellow thread. She tossed it onto the counter. "Stan left this here 3 years ago. It's clean, sort of." Dominic stared at the shirt. He looked at the vibrant blue polyester. He looked at Maya. "You want me to wear that?" "Beggars can't be choosers, Mr. Costa." With a long, long sigh, Dominic picked up the shirt. He winced as he slid his arms into the sleeves, carefully navigating his bandaged ribs. He buttoned it up. It was a tragic fit. The bright blue clashed horrifically with his severe, sharp features and dark slacks. He looked like a hungover tourist who had gotten lost on his way to a casino. Maya bit the inside of her cheek until it bled to stop herself from laughing. "It brings out your eyes?" Dominic buttoned the final button and looked at her deadpan. If a picture of this ever surfaces, I will burn this city to the ground. At 3:55 a.m., a nondescript rusted plumbing van pulled into the alley behind the diner. Dominic's burner phone buzzed once. He stood up from the stool. The air between them grew thick. There were 1,000 things to say, heavy things about gratitude and danger and the strange, undeniable tether that had formed between them. Dominic walked around the counter. He stopped inches from Maya. He didn't reach for his wallet. He didn't offer her a check. He knew better now. Instead, he reached out and gently took her hand, the one that Tommy had bruised days ago. The purple marks were fading into a dull yellow. He ran his thumb lightly over her knuckles. "I clean up my messes, Maya." Dominic said, his voice a low rumble. "Rossi is a mess. When it's clean, I'll come back. Just don't bleed on my floor next time." Maya whispered, her throat tight. Dominic gave her a single nod. He turned the neon blue bowling shirt a bright splash of absurdity in the dim kitchen and walked out the back door into the cold night. 3 weeks passed. The diner returned to its grueling, mundane rhythm. Stan complained about food costs. The late-night cab drivers returned to their corner booth. The neon sign buzzed its familiar, stuttering song. But Maya didn't return to normal. She bought a cheap daily newspaper on her way to work every morning. She scoured the metro section looking for the telltale signs of a mob war. For the first week, there was nothing. Then on a Tuesday, the headline broke. But it wasn't a story about a warehouse shootout or a car bomb. Federal indictments handed down to Rossi Crime Syndicate. The article detailed a massive, unprecedented raid on Carmine Rossi's legitimate business fronts. Warehouses were seized, accounts were frozen. An anonymous source had delivered decades' worth of encrypted ledgers directly to the FBI. Carmine Rossi was in federal custody, denied bail, facing life in prison for racketeering, extortion, and tax evasion. Maya sat on a milk crate in the back alley, drinking a stale cup of coffee, reading the article 3 times over. Dominic hadn't fired a single bullet. He hadn't started a street war that would have caught innocent people in the crossfire. He had taken his enemy apart with paperwork. He had weaponized the bureaucracy. It was the most terrifying, brilliant, and deeply considerate thing she could have imagined. 2 more weeks slipped by. Winter officially settled over the city, frosting the diner windows. It was a Friday night. 1:30 a.m. Maya was wiping down the laminate counter, her mind focused on the fact that Chloe had aced her biology midterm. The knot of anxiety that had lived in Maya's chest for years felt marginally looser. The bell above the door chimed. Maya didn't look up immediately. "Grill's off. We have meatloaf." "I'll take the meatloaf." Maya's hand stopped moving. The rag dropped to the counter. She turned around. Dominic stood in the doorway. He wasn't wearing a $3,000 suit, and he wasn't wearing Stan's bowling shirt. He wore a simple dark wool sweater and well-fitted jeans. He looked healthy. The hollow exhaustion around his eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady calm. He walked to the counter and took a seat on the stool near the kitchen doors. Maya stared at him. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but this time it had absolutely nothing to do with fear. "You're alive," she managed to say. "I told you I'd come back when it was clean," Dominic replied. Maya grabbed the coffee pot, her hands trembling slightly, and poured him a mug of black coffee. She slid it across the counter. Dominic didn't touch it right away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy manila envelope. He slid it across the laminate until it bumped against Maya's hand. Maya immediately crossed her arms. "Dominic, we talked about this. I don't want your money." "It's not money," he said calmly. "Open it." Suspicious Maya wiped her hands on her apron, picked up the envelope, and unwound the string closure. She pulled out a thick stack of stapled legal documents. She read the first page. Then she read it again. "This is the deed to the building. Maya said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She looked up at him. You bought Carmichael's diner. Stan wanted to retire, Dominic said, taking a sip of his coffee. His knees are shot and his wife gave him an ultimatum. He sold the building and the business to a holding company. So you're my boss now? Maya's spine stiffened. The instinct to fight back, to refuse the handout, flared instantly. Is this how it works? You couldn't buy me off with a tip, so you bought the roof over my head. No. Dominic said, his voice entirely devoid of arrogance. He tapped the second page of the document. Keep reading. Maya flipped the page. It was a commercial lease agreement. The holding company was leasing the ground floor restaurant space to a new tenant. The tenant's name was Maya. The monthly rent was exactly what she currently paid for her tiny, run-down basement apartment. It was a fraction of what commercial real estate in this district cost. You aren't my charity case. Maya, Dominic said, looking her dead in the eye. You are the hardest worker I have ever met. I didn't buy it for you. I bought it as an investment. You are going to sign that lease, and you are going to run this place. You'll keep the profits, you'll fix the grill, and you'll pay me rent on the 1st of every month. If you're late, I'll charge you a penalty. Maya stared at the lease. The numbers blurred. The grinding, endless treadmill of poverty, the constant fear of eviction, the sheer exhaustion of working for someone else. He was handing her the keys to stop it all. But he wasn't doing it by treating her like a victim. He was treating her like an equal. She looked at him. The feared Mafia boss, the ruthless executioner sitting on a cheap stool, drinking cheap coffee, offering her a fair deal. A single tear spilled over her eyelashes, cutting a clean track down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. The grill needs a new grease trap. Maya choked out a watery laugh, escaping her throat. Put it in a repair request. Dominic said, a genuine, warm smile finally breaking across his face. Your landlord is very responsive. Maya picked up a pen from her apron pocket. She clicked it. She signed the bottom of the lease with a flourish, the scratch of the ballpoint pen echoing loudly in the quiet diner. She pushed the paperwork back to him. Then she reached under the counter, grabbed a fresh, damp bar towel and tossed it to him. It landed perfectly in front of his coffee mug. Dominic looked at the rag, then up at her, raising an eyebrow. Wipe down your side of the counter. Maya ordered, crossing her arms and leaning back. The new owner is very particular about messes. Dominic Costa, the terror of the city, the king of the underworld, picked up the damp rag. Yes, ma'am, he said softly and started to wipe. Sometimes the greatest power isn't a loaded gun or a ruthless empire. It's a damp rag and the courage to demand respect. Maya and Dominic proved that even in a world of absolute shadows, a little fluorescent diner light can change everything. Thank you so much for following this journey through all 9 parts. If Maya and Dominic's story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button, share this video with fellow romance and drama lovers, and subscribe to the channel for more deeply human stories. Drop a comment below. What was your favorite moment?